Welcome to Man vs. Meeple, the show where we talk about everything board game related. I am your host, Jeremy Salinas, aka Drakkenstrike, and I am extremely excited today because we're about to bring you an exclusive to Evolution Climate, one of my favorite hand management games of all time. It's the second expansion from North Star Games to this incredible line of games. To help me explain to you Evolution Climate, I have my friend and co-host, David Waybright.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very excited. The least of not which is this first player marker that's exciting me, for sure.
Do you remember in the first edition, the little plastic toy?
Oh, I do a little bit. I played that. I didn't play the first edition too many times, but
I love that guy. I'm probably gonna have to break him out.
It's really cool. I have to say, I'm a big. And this sounds silly, but I like it when people go the extra mile and do a unique first player marker. It's cool.
Yeah. So. I love this game. And not just Climate, but just Evolution as a whole. It still remains one of my top 3 to 5 best games of all time. It's one of those games that's incredibly simple to learn and teach. It can be a family-friendly game, or it can be an incredibly complex, competitive game between like-minded people. So it's... Before we get into Climate, though, let's talk a little bit about just Evolution as a whole and how it plays. So it comes with just cards and some species boards, right? That's all the game really is.
It's built around
right?
the species boards and the cards,
and
for sure.
And the traits. So there's 20 or so different traits in the game. They all have different abilities to them, and they all have a little number on the bottom corner that tells you how much food you're going to add as a collective whole or a collective group to a watering hole, which is where people will feed during the course of the game. And then it comes with these species boards, which has 2 plots of holes, one for the population of that species and one for the body size. Right. Through the course of the game, you're simply going to be adding traits to these cards and growing species, growing multiple species on your tableau in order to gather the most points, right?
And evolving them.
And evolving them, right? So it's extremely simple to play. At the start of the game, you're going to draw 4 cards plus 1 card or 1 additional card for every species that you have in front of you. Now, that's a little bit different from the base game that came out 2 years ago, in which you draw 3 cards plus 1 for every species. And the reason for that is because Climate adds a little more nuances with the heat and the cold and be able to protect against those things. So
there's more you can do with the cards, so I think that's probably one of the big reasons why they added that.
So speaking of cards, David, when you get your initial set of cards and every round hereafter, how do you use your cards?
So at the beginning of the game, you're going to get 4 cards plus 1 because everyone has a species cards.
Right.
So the first thing everyone's going to do is you have to select 1 card and put it into the center of the board. That's the watering hole.
Right.
The reason you're going to be picking that is because, as Jeremy mentioned, there's a number here in the lower right-hand corner that represents the food that's going to bring to the watering hole at the end of the round, and we'll get to that in a second.
Right.
But that's the important part of this game. You're feeding your species. So after everyone's done that, the first player can then play as few or as many of their cards as they want. Mm-hmm. And there's just a few things you can do with them. The first thing you can do is you can just discard a card and take another species board. So you're adding another species to your tableau.
Right.
The big reason for doing that, in addition to having greater population to score more food points, is that you get to draw more cards when you have more species in front of you. So that's kind of a really cool dynamic there.
Right.
The second thing you can do is discard a card to increase the population or the body size of any one species on your tableau. So then the last thing you can do, and this is kind of the flavor of the game, is play the cards face down on a species, and those will be the traits. At the end of the round, everyone reveals those traits at the same time.
Right.
But that's where the real strategy of the game comes into play.
So the crux is, though, when you play traits face down in front of you, there's a limit of 3 traits per species, and you can't double up on the same traits. But you can also, at any time, if you're finding a species to not being able to score you enough points, or you just simply don't like the traits on at that time, you can always replace.
And that happens. You will have to be replacing traits quite a bit.
Right. So once everyone reveals their traits, you're going to go around and you're going to feed one player at a time from the watering hole. How does that work?
So the first thing you do, everyone reveals, and then you go to the watering hole, like we said. These cards are going to be face down. So everyone flips those over, and the first thing you're going to do is look at the food that it supplies to the watering hole. That food goes to the watering hole.
And it can either be positive or negative cards in there, right?
Some of those cards say -3. So it's really, when you're putting those cards in there, you're really trying to balance what you need against what other players need. If you have a way of getting yourself fed without going to the watering hole, then you might want to put negative cards in there. It's a really cool interactive part of the game. This game has so many interactive intricacies. It's really very good. So you add the food, and then in player order, like Jeremy's saying, the first player takes one food off of the watering hole and feeds one of his species, an herbivore in that case, because carnivores can only take, they take food a different way.
Now, here's the cool thing about it, too, is that these traits allow you to sometimes break those rules.
Exactly.
There's cards like Foraging, which allow you to take multiple. There's cards like Long Neck, which allow you to bypass that and take them directly from the food bank.
Yeah.
There's Cooperation, which allow you to feed other species that are next to you.
And that's kind of the meat and potatoes of this game. When you're playing, particularly the herbivore, you're trying to get traits on there so that you can break those feeding rules, so that you're grabbing food sooner. Because once all the food's out of the food hole, or the watering hole, sorry, you're out of luck. If you if you have population that hasn't been fed, they're going to die off for sure.
Correct. So how that basically works is, say for instance, this creature was only able to eat, or this species was only able to eat one food, this population would simply die off, right?
You'd still score the point of the food, but yeah, you die off and you have a smaller population for the next round.
And if you can't feed them at all and they only have one population, it goes extinct.
Exactly.
So carnivores are different though, right?
Yeah, carnivores play very different. They cannot ever eat food out of the watering hole.
That's right.
So what they do, but they do bring yet another interactive and maybe quote-unquote nasty aspect. You're attacking other species.
Even your own.
Even your own. It's often, you want to attack everyone else, but in certain cases you have to end up attacking your own species sometimes to feed your carnivore if you don't want them to die off. Right. I've seen, every game I've played, I've seen someone do that at least once.
Right. So at the end of the round, everyone adjusts down their population depending upon how many of the... how much food they can't feed to their specific population, right?
Right.
Those food pieces become essentially points which go into their bag at the end of the round. So the more food you eat or can eat, the more points that you get. And then it's just rinse and repeat, right?
Right.
Draw
you do
4 cards plus 1 for every species, and just keep doing that until the cards run out.
Yeah, you play until the deck, which is a pretty healthy sized deck, but you play until the deck runs out, and that triggers the end of the game. In some cases, you'll finish that round, and then you add up your food points. And then I think that at the end of the game, there's some points that you add for the traits that you have left, the population on your board, or the species that you have left.
So what does climate add? Climate adds a couple different things to it. David, I'll let you explain this because I know you enjoy this.
Yeah, climate is very cool. It adds, again, yet another layer of interaction. When you put the cards in the watering hole, there's another icon that we failed to mention earlier because we didn't want to go there, but before you add the food to the watering hole, you're going to look at these suns and these snowflakes. You're basically going to see which there is more of.
Right.
If there's more suns, you're going to move the climate marker closer to the hot end of the spectrum, if you will.
Right.
And if there's more snowflakes, you move it to the colder end. Now, these sections, if you get far enough, are going to activate some things that happen that generally are not good for the species.
And those are typically adding more food. If it's in a warm climate, you're going to be adding more food, but you're also going to be killing off populations that have larger body sizes.
Right. The heavier species don't like the heat, so they're going to die off a little bit sooner in the hot weather.
And vice versa. So how that works is basically, say the cold marker moved to this area here, anything that's a 1 or a 2 body species is going to lose 1 population. So anytime you see these snowflakes or these sun markers, that's how many population you're going to lose. Now you can also affect some of the weather cards in here too. The climate
exactly.
cards.
Back to the traits. That's one of the great things about this game is that the traits allow you to account for anything that could happen to you bad.
Right.
So there are traits that allow you in the winter to fend off against the cold, like hibernation, or burrowing.
Right.
And the same thing goes for the hot climate too.
Right.
So just like playing against the opponent, you're playing against the game as well. When it gets hot, when it gets cold, you have to adjust with your species. And another cool thing is you can specifically try to get it to go hot if you are going a certain route. If I'm going to have small animals and my opponents has a whole bunch of huge carnivores, I'm going to go hot and watch them die in the sun.
I mean, that's basically what I did during the game. One of the games that we played, I was pushing the hot agenda because you guys are all herbivores and I had a carnivore. And I was just... And one of the things we didn't mention, some of these cards, when the marker hits these cards, these also activate. And there are ones on there that say... no food this round.
Oh, there are some devastating ones. Some of them are pretty mild, but some of those cards, there's one I think called Meteorite. Yeah, Meteorite makes it so you don't add food that round to the watering hole or the rest of the game. And I haven't seen this card come out, but I'd be really interested to see what that game turned into.
It would be over quickly, probably.
It would be over quickly, and it would be carnivores eating each other.
Yeah. So let's just get into the pros and cons. This Evolution as a whole has always been a game of action and reaction, right? It's one of those rare hand management games that is completely flexible, completely open-ended, and driven by however you wish to develop your species from round to round. It's also remarkably well designed because it's one of the few games that has so few components. I mean, there's 20-some cards in here, maybe 24 traits in the game.
It's far simpler than it appears at first glance.
And there is a defense and an offense to everything. And it's your ability to mitigate those things as they arise to gather the most points, creating a creature that's highly sustainable. If he creates a carnivore, I can go climb.
Right,
if
you can climb
create
a tree.
A carnivore, I can go burrow, or I can take flight, or all these different things that you can do to kind of avoid some of the negative aspects of the game. There's mitigation too. Say your species goes extinct, but it has 3 traits. Well, for every card or every trait you lose, you're just drawing more cards.
Right. Though your hand size is definitely the mitigation tool.
Right.
There's a number of things you can do to get more cards, having more species, getting a lot of traits out there when they go extinct. Because when you have a big hand of cards, you're able to adjust a lot better than you would normally.
That's right.
Like Jeremy was saying, if a carnivore is continually, just attacking you and taking your population size down, if you don't get the right cards in your hand, there's sometimes not much you can do about that. And you've got to change route. So if you can get more cards in your hand, it's more likely you're going to get one of those things that gives you a defense
But it's truly
mechanism.
amazing how the game can change so rapidly with just one single trait being played.
That's true. There are some traits that are tough to overcome. I had defensive herding on one of my games, which makes it very, very difficult for the carnivores to come after you, which I was happy about.
Right.
But the carnivores after me weren't too happy about it because it was just a point scoring machine that I had in front of me with that one species.
Yeah. It's this game is phenomenal, and if you guys haven't had a chance to play it, I would highly suggest you guys to go out and give it a shot. I don't think this is one of those games that typically just stares out at people and says, hey, I'm a complex game, because it does kind of present itself as a family-friendly game, and it is. It can be played that way. But as I said at the very beginning, there's a lot of intricacies in how you play the cards, when you play the cards. And, that's kind of weird, because I was thinking about this last night, David. We just reviewed The Networks, right, by Gil. And that game and this game have a very close correlation in the fact that you are constantly building an engine and then breaking that engine down. The same type of aspect. You're building a species, you're finding that your opponent, in this case, is creating something to counter it, so you break it down, and then you rebuild it.
That's true. That's actually an interesting analogy. And I think, too, the little engines that you're making with your species in this, too, sometimes you can abandon. In fact, sometimes, I don't know if we mentioned this earlier, but carnivores have to eat their own, you have to eat your own species.
They have to eat, period.
Yeah, they have to eat. So sometimes if you have a species that's struggling, and you're just not getting the cards that you need, and you've got a hungry carnivore, feed the carnivore, cut and run, get another species out there if you can't get traits on that species that you need.
Yeah.
One thing I would say, and I wouldn't say this is a con, but I will say, even though this appears family-friendly and it's got some complexity to it, one thing I've noticed is it doesn't look like any other game. It's got some components that make you, gamers will come up to this and go, I can't quite place where I would put this against other games. You don't look at this and go, oh, I see, it's one of those games.
Yeah.
You look at this and go, And some people will walk away thinking, I don't want to learn a whole new concept. But if you sit down and play this, the game is, like many games, you play one round and you're into it. One thing I'll say, and this is sort of my benchmark, I have a teenage son who you have to break his arm or twist it to play a board game. We played this actually last night with one of his friends who was over, and they both liked it quite a bit. He will generally not say whether he likes a game,
right?
For fear of playing another one, but he liked this one a lot. I think the appeal of evolving your species, it's like leveling up and
it is
adjusting,
it
and like
gives you that feeling, right?
It's really good.
Yeah, I can. You're always complaining about your son not wanting to play games with you, so if you say that, I know it's got to be a good game, right? We are giving away a copy. Forgot to mention that, right? So copies. We're giving away a standalone version of the game, a conversion kit for the original Evolution. What do you have over there?
Yeah, we're also going to give away. North Star's been very good. They've given us this Evolution shirt that we're going to give away, and we've got some coasters, all sorts of nice Evolution swag here to give away. So we're going to do that again like we always do in the comments. Say whatever you'd like. Hopefully it's positive. Tell us if you've played Evolution. Tell us whatever you'd like. But comment down below for your chance to win either the full version, the conversion kit, or some of these other goodies.
Yeah. This is one of those games that I would never turn away playing.
I wouldn't either.
I can honestly say that. This is one of my favorite games of all time. I love playing this game. I can't wait to see what else comes out from this, because I think they can expand this far into the future.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I missed out on the original Evolution, so I will be getting the full version. So I'm looking forward to adding this to my collection and playing it, making my son play it many, many times.
Well, thanks again for watching, guys. Make comments at YouTube. Follow us on Twitter. And just keep watching. Appreciate it. I'm Jeremy Salinas.
I'm David Waybright.
And thanks for watching, guys.
Bye-bye.